Let's explore parent-child communication in the context of components. We will see how parent and child components communicate through props and callbacks. It is a fundamental concept in component-based programming. Props are read-only data pass from parent components to child components. Let's look at the code. Here's an example of how a parent component passes props to a child component. Notice how the parent component renders the child component and passes the name John and age 25 as props. Props are similar to HTML attributes, but they allow you to pass data, including objects, arrays, and functions. Child components receive props as function parameters. The child component receives the props as an argument to its function. In this example, the child component receives a props object as a parameter. You can then access the individual props using dot notation such as props.name and props.age. The values of these props can then be used within the child component, allowing it to display dynamic data passed down from its parent. Callbacks are functions passed as props to enable child-to-parent communication. Let's see it with code example. Here's an example of a parent component passing a callback function to a child component. The parent component defines a function called handleClick, which logs a message to the console. It then passes this function as a prop called onClick to the child component. This allows the child component to trigger the function defined in the parent. Child components call the callback function to communicate back to parent. Let's see an example. Here's how a child component uses the callback function passed down from its parent. The child component receives the onClick prop, which is a function passed down from the parent. It then attaches this function to the onClick event of a button. When the button is clicked, the onClick function which is defined in the parent component is executed. Let's see a complete example of parent-child communication using props and callbacks. Here's the parent component. It initializes a state variable called count to 0. It also defines a function called increment, which increments the count state by 1. Finally, it renders a counter component, passing the count state as a prop called value and the increment function as a prop called onIncrement. Here's the child component. It receives the value and onIncrement props from the parent component. It displays the current value of count and attaches the onIncrement function to the onClick event of a button. When the button is clicked, the increment function in the parent component is executed, incrementing the count state and re-rendering the counter component with the updated value. Data flows downward from parent to child. Events flow upward from child to parent. With props, data is passed from a parent component down to its child component, allowing the parent to provide data and configurations to the child. With callbacks, events or actions triggered in a child component can be communicated back to the parent, enabling the parent to respond to these events and update its state or trigger other actions. Props pass data from parent to child. Callbacks enable child-to-parent communication. Props are read-only in child components. Therefore, props plus callbacks is equal to complete two-way communication between components. If you like this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Visit CodeLucky.com for more such useful content.